us the presentation. If you would like to speak while he's coming up, if you'd like to speak, please come up, fill out a form, and they'll give them to me. So anybody who wants to speak, we welcome it. You're welcome to speak, but we need to have the information on who you are and kind of your address and whatnot. So
Thank you, Mayor. I don't know if I should feel honored or fearful that I'll go down in infamy for being part of the first ever Truth and Taxation hearing in Springville. I think the Truth and Taxation Code was adopted into state law back in the 80s, and Springville is one of, I think, only one other Utah County city that's never raised taxes and been required to go through the Truth and Taxation hearing process. This first slide, I'm just going to sort of set the table and then walk you through a couple of slides on property tax generally, and then the main purpose for this meeting tonight is for public comment, and so I'll get out of the way and let the public comment. There's really two primary drivers of this proposed property tax increase. The first one, and we've talked about this many years in a row, is the fact that property tax is currently the second largest revenue source in the general fund. The general fund is the fund of the city that supports all the general operations and general governmental functions of the city. And inflation over time has eroded the buying power of that property tax, of those property tax dollars. And that's because outside of growth, property tax revenue stays level. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that means here in just a second. The other big driver for this year in particular was a fairly significant service level change in the fire department, where we transitioned from partial full-time coverage to 24-hour full-time coverage in the fire department, which resulted in about $1 million budgetary increase compared to last fiscal year. And after several budget strategy meetings with the council and study sessions that were associated with that, we took on a three-prong approach to try to balance the budget. We are currently operating under a tentative budget that incorporates a 1.5% reduction from fiscal 23 operating budgets. That was one prong. The other was to increase the enterprise fund transfer rate from 5% to 6.5%, and all the notices for that went out, and that was considered as part of the budget hearing that we held back in June. And then the third leg of the stool, the third prong, was to increase the general operations portion of the property tax levy by 4.8%. I'm going to talk a little bit more specifically and in detail about property tax and how it works, just to make sure we're all on the same footing. So within any taxing area, and technically in Springville there are two separate taxing areas, there are multiple entities that levy property tax against property owners. The county is one, the city is one, special service districts like Central Utah Water Conservancy District is another one, and really the biggest one is the school district. And the way property tax works under state law is that each entity is guaranteed the prior year's property tax revenue regardless of what property values do. So there's an inverse relationship between the property tax rate and the assessed value of the properties that it's being levied on. So if property values go up, the rate goes down, so that we keep the revenue that comes to the city the same. So the only new property tax revenue that the city gets is if there is additional growth. If someone builds a new house in the city or a new business opens in the city, those new entities will pay in at the same rate that all the prior owners were paying in at. And under state law, if the city proposes to collect more revenue than what's guaranteed under the law, we're required to go through the truth and taxation process. And this tonight is one step of that. This is just a graphic representation to give you an idea visually of the players within the property tax arena. So you can see this little black sliver up here is some administrative and overhead costs for assessing and collecting. Some of that goes to the state, some of that goes to the county. Springville City, when you get your tax bill in the mail, the city's portion of that is about 12% of your total property tax bill. Central Utah Water Conservancy District is about 4%, about 7% goes to the county, and then 3/4 of your property tax bill goes to the school district. So really the school district is the driver in total property tax collection. So when you're looking at your bill, just know that most of that is coming from the school district, and really is impertinent to tonight's discussion. We're really just talking about the 12% that's the city's here tonight. Let me walk you through again this concept of how property taxes are calculated and how it works as it relates to the county. So first of all, residential properties under state law are exempt from taxation on 45% of the assessed or the fair market value of the property. So that becomes the taxable value for a property. There's a 45% discount for residential properties. For commercial properties, they pay at full fair market value as determined by the county assessor. The formula to determine the rate basically says the city will propose its budgeted tax revenue, and most years we have just used last year's number as the numerator in this equation. Then that number is divided by the total taxable value as established by the county assessor, and that equals the tax rate. So to show you how this works practically, if the city was collecting $100,000 in tax revenue in a given year, and the total assessed value in the city was $100 million, the tax rate would be 0.1% or 0.001 is the mill levy. If in the ensuing year the city was going to keep the revenue exactly the same, let's assume there was no new growth, we would say the city's going to collect $100,000, but the assessor goes out and does his job and comes back and says property values have gone up, and now the total assessed value in the city is $110 million, then you'll see the rate actually goes down to 0.09%. So that's sort of a representation mathematically of the inverse relationship between assessed values and the rate. This chart actually, to me, or graph, I guess, tells a story, similar story in a little bit different way. So let me walk you through that because there's a lot of lines and numbers on here. This black line loosely represents property values over time, and this is about a 20-year snapshot here from early 2000s, and it is indexed to this axis on the right in terms of values. These other two lines are property tax rates, and really within the property tax there's two rates that are embedded in that. One is general operations of the city, so those are dollars that support police, fire, ambulance, library, parks and rec, those general and core governmental services. The other line, which is represented by this gray line on the bottom, is debt service money. So these are dollars that are levied against property tax as the result of a bond election. So if the city decides to issue general obligation bonds and commit property tax as the security on the bonds, that portion is levied on the property tax as well. So if you go back historically, you can sort of see if you look on property values, early 2000s, things were rising pretty quickly as we went through some heavy development in the city, and property tax values went up, or home prices went up considerably. And then and I guess I should mention these vertical bars here represent recessions that occurred nationally in the United States. We hit sort of the Great Recession that started kind of late 2008 into 2009. And you can see home prices dipped there. As the home prices dipped, property tax rates went up. As we've dug out of that recession and rates in Utah have continued to climb, property tax rates have gone down. On the bond section, we, up until 2009, did not have any general obligation bonds. So what happened in 2009, 2010 technically was we issued bonds for the construction of the library. And so there was an assessment that was added to the property tax bills in 2009. You'll see that line actually goes down, and that's because we have new growth, which means the debt service is fixed, but we get new growth, so we split that same amount across more people, so everybody's rate goes down a little bit as the city grows. And in 2016, we issued the debt that was associated with the rec center, so another big jump here. But as the city has continued to grow and these debt amounts are fixed, the rates have actually gone down because we're spreading those payments across more participants. And the important part, and part of why I separate these into two different lines, is these debt service levies will go away once the bonds have been retired. So both of these were 20-year bonds, so the 2010 library bonds will go away in 2030, and the CRC levy will go away in 2036. They'll just go away altogether. This was an interesting graph as I put it together, and maybe I'll just sort of walk you through what this means. So this is last year's certified tax rate. The blue section here represents the general operations portion of the tax levy. The gray part is the debt service amount. Combined, they equal the certified tax rate of 0.001159. We've had continued growth in the city, so the debt service portion that is being levied against properties has actually gone down because values have gone up and we've had growth. And what we're here tonight to discuss is the fact that we are proposing to raise the general operations rate beyond what the assessor would have calculated as the certified rate. But combined with the debt service portion, the total mill levy, or the total certified rate, is actually lower than what last year's rate was. This is just a quick calculation of how this affects individuals, and these numbers would have gone out in the public notices that were required under state law, and also should have, everyone that owns property in the city should have received from the county their property tax estimate with these numbers on here. They take the average home price in Springville, which according to the assessor is $454,000. On the residential side, and all these numbers on this page are for residential properties, there's a 45% exemption, which means the taxable value is actually $249,700. So in the 2023 tax bill for general operations, we'd have this tax rate, 0.000746, which results in a tax bill for general operations on that home of $186. This is if there had been no tax increase, and then another $90 for debt service for a total tax bill of $276. With the proposed tax increase, the debt service amount is the same. The operations would increase to $195.27 for a total tax bill of $285.91, which is a difference of $8.99. So the impact to the average residents in Springville with this proposed tax increase is $8.99 for the year. On the commercial side, if you own a business that's valued at the same dollar amount as the residential, there's no exemption. So I've just done the calculations again. Without the exemption, obviously the bill is higher. $338 on the general operations, $164 for debt, for a total of $503. And then with the tax increase in place, would be $355 on operations, $164 again for the debt, total of $519. So a total of $16.35 impact for the year. This graph is a little dated because it doesn't include all of the new and proposed rates. It comes from Provo, and a presentation that they gave, but dividing the general operations portion out next to the total tax rate, you can see in terms of general operations in the county, we're actually one of the lowest rates. And even with this increase, we would move up just slightly, but there are several other cities on this graph that are going through truth and taxation, including Provo, which right now is at the bottom. The total tax rate, because of our debt service, we're kind of right in the middle there. And again, might move up slightly with this tax increase, but you can kind of see relatively how we're positioned within the county as it relates to property tax rates. This slide we can probably just ignore. This is just the process that we go through, and just to let you know we've complied with all these notices, and tonight is the public hearing. So if you've got any specific questions for me, I'd be happy to address them. Otherwise, I'll get out of the way and you can hold your public hearing. Questions?
Okay, questions for Bruce?
I think you did a good job.
Oh, that's excellent, Bruce, thanks.
Okay, after that presentation, we'll now open it up for public comment. You are welcome to come up to the podium. We hope that you filled out a form. If you haven't filled out a form, we'll get you to fill out a form after, but just identify who you are and your address. And if you have any criminal records or anything that the chief of police would like to be aware of. Anyway, anybody who'd like to come up, please feel very comfortable to come up.
Hey, so I have a question about the total revenue then. The graphs up there showed the percentage graph. Maybe we could show that again. Is that possible? The percentage graph versus the housing price graph.
Maybe you can be giving Kim your name and information.
Kent Wolf. What else do you need? Yeah,
I'm not sure which,
yeah, the one back.
That one right there.
Yep.
Is it that one?
Yes.
Okay.
We see in this graph, we have a percentage rate, and we also have a housing cost adjustment. Are these proportional in scale?
there are two different axes. So the black line is the axis on the right, so that's in hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
And yes, they're not the same, no, these are in small decimals, but the idea of the graph is to show the relative comparison between, or the inverse relationship of the home prices and the tax rate.
Right. So with the axes adjusted how they are, you could change these axes to make them look not so nice, because they actually look very inverse here. Are the axes, in other words, if you divide by one by the other, are you going to get the same number through those years?
There may be some distortion, and I didn't correct it.
Yeah, but generally, if you do that, you get total revenue. So is total basically what my question is total revenue, has it stayed the same through all these years?
Total revenue has gone up by a growth factor. In other words, to
Well-
the extent that new homes have been built and new businesses have been built, there is additional revenue that's coming.
Yes, and so if you don't account for that, the tax dollars per home has stayed the same through these years. Okay, that's what I just wanted to know. Thank you.
Good question.
Great question. Others? Okay. Once, going twice. All right. Sure.
Good thing you didn't get to 3, Ken.
Yeah, yeah.
So my question is, with the growth, I think I saw that your primary need for additional funding is the fire department. but is that not covered by the intrinsic growth of the city?
Why don't I take a shot at that one? I think that's a good one. That's a great question because that follows kind of my theory of government here. So as the city grows and the taxes come in from growth, we should be able to support our services. The one difference here is the service level itself changed last year, where we moved last year moved from part-time fire coverage to 24-hour coverage with firefighters there. So you had an increase in service level that's not covered by our existing taxes. Is that making sense?
Sorry, so it seems like if you have more people coming to the city, that you need more firefighters.
Correct.
But that their additional taxes should cover the additional firefighters needed. So why is there a discrepancy there where you
You're-
need more, a higher proportion of firefighting funds per growth?
Yeah, you're absolutely right if the service level remains the same. So see if I can come with it. I mean, the fire example is a good example. We're paying for we were paying last year for 12 hours of firefighters in the station and volunteers for the other 12 hours in the station. That had a cost. When we went to 24 hours of firefighters in the station, that cost was higher. And that differential is what the tax is covering, not the just growth of numbers of firefighters we needed. And be happy to sit down with the budget and show you how that was calculated.
So it's so you've added firefighters in the past, and that's been covered by the growth
Correct.
of the city. Now you're saying let's go 24/7. So now that is
Is a higher cost.
a step change and a higher
Exactly.
service level for the city. Okay, thank you.
You got it. Yep, you got it.
If I can, Mayor, to maybe just add one other thought to that, because while that is true, and I agree with that, there's a more, in my mind, a more fundamental consideration that needs to be taken, which is the fact that, yes, we're getting additional revenue because we have growth in the city, but the dollars that we're receiving are staying static. If there was no growth, we would receive the exact same amount of revenue. But the cost for the services that are being provided is increasing by inflation. So the buying power of those dollars is being depleted every year that we experience any inflation. And so to the extent that we don't raise the property tax rate lockstep with inflation, we lose buying power with those revenue dollars that come in. We compensate that in large measure. It's somewhat hidden by the fact that we have growth, and that growth sort of compensates for us not increasing the funds. But to the extent that we don't have growth, or if we change service levels, then we've got to affect a change in the property tax rate.
And it's, I was going to say that's such an important concept, and we used this before, and I'm going to use round numbers in the time I've been here, but in the year 2000, Springville had roughly equal sales tax and property tax values coming into the budget at about $2 million. Our property tax component now is around $4 million of the non-general obligation side. So we've grown, we've essentially doubled the city, which matches kind of our population growth from 20,000 to 36,000. In the same time, sales tax, which has a growth component and an inflation component, this year we're planning on $10 million. So if we'd increase property tax annually just by inflation, you would have $6 million more in your general fund to support the services to match what the question was being asked, which as you grow, just can't you continue to add for parks or police or fire? And that differential has been very real and hidden by growth.
I always, if it's okay to say something.
Oh, yeah.
It sometimes gets confusing because we're saying it's going for this increase is to cover the cost of the fire department. And that other growth that was the good question, in the meantime, the others are growing too. And that's where that growth is still covering the parks people. You need another park person. You need another crossing guard or two with new elementary schools. You need another another policeman. You need, and the vehicles that go with it. And it's not just that growth coverage has a hard time keeping up with the growth. It barely keeps you stationary. And that's why the explanation of the increase is because the increase of service in that one department. And I think we all felt like that was just really worth it for that cost per family in the city.
Okay, great. Going once, going twice. No bidder? No, those are great questions, and we appreciate you asking them. We honestly do. This is your city, and we want to do what's right, and we need input, and we need your suggestions. So we appreciate you having the courage to be able to stand up and ask a question, because it's been quite an education for us to learn about how this property tax works and the rates and whatnot. We had a work session on this, and if you remember, most of us, except for Chris, failed it because we didn't understand the inner workings of how these rates really worked. And I think Bruce has done a good job of simplifying it tonight. So, okay, then I'll
motion that we close the public hearing.
have a motion.
I'll second.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve resolution number 2023-25, adopting the certified tax rate of .001145, comprised of a tax rate of .000782 for general operations of the city and a tax rate of .00363 for interest and sinking fund bond purposes, to be levied on all taxable property within the corporate limits of Springville City in order to support the tax revenue in the general fund and debt service fund.
Okay, have a motion. Second.
I'll second.
It's a roll call vote. Mr. Snelson,
Yes.
Mr. Sorensen,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Liz,
Yes.
Craig.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. With that, we have a need to approve finally the budget, which has been, you all have, which is a small document. So, any questions in relationship to the budget? Okay, then I'll entertain a motion for a resolution and adoption.
Just, I think it's important that we
please.
say, we have reviewed it and we have approved it in its form, and this is to adopt it.
But, right, we have approved a tentative budget.
Yes, so it's not
This
like
is,
we
there's
haven't.
nothing else new
Yeah,
here
we've
except for
looked at
just
it
what
and
we
passed
just,
to this one.
correct.
I think that's important to know.
That's a good for the record.
We didn't just get this
Yeah,
tonight.
yeah.
Yeah.
Bruce, this might help me sleep tonight.
You're welcome.
Chris, thank you for clarifying that. That's important.
Yeah.
Okay? I'm open for a,
I'll make a motion to approve resolution number 2023-26, adopting a final budget for Springville City Corporation in the amount of $121,448,868 for expenditures and transfers in the 2024 fiscal year ending June 30th, 2024.
have a motion. I need a second.
Second.
The roll call vote. Mr. Jensen?
Yes.
Mr. Sorensen?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Ms. Crandall?
Yes.
Mr. Snelson?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Any other items that need to be gone through? Any reason for a closed session?
No.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion then for adjournment.
I'll motion that we attend this meeting.
This
end
is really
meeting.
exciting when they don't want to get out of here, so
I just looked at the clock. It's like 7:30. Really?
you can go watch a movie.
I know.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Appreciate it very much. Bruce, thank you for your effort and appreciate that presentation. It was very clarifying, so.
Hey, we shot those slides 4 weeks ago, 4 months ago.
That
The
was
slides are